2.5 million blocks of stone. Some weigh as much as a car. A few weigh as much as a loaded freight truck. Stacked into a mountain 480 feet high, with a base so wide it could swallow 10 football fields. Now here is the part that should stop you. The four sides of that mountain are aligned to true north, south, east, and west, within a fraction of a single degree. The base is level across 13 acres to within the width of your thumb. This is the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the people who built it had no iron tools, no pulleys, no wheels they could use to haul the stone, no surveying instruments as we would recognize them. They had copper, rope, wood, and water. They had their hands, and they had each other. With those, they raised the most precise large structure on Earth, and it stayed the tallest building humans had ever made for the next 38 centuries. The obvious question is the one we are going to answer. How? To understand the problem, you have to strip away everything we take for granted. It is roughly 2560 before the Common Era. There is no iron. That metal will not arrive in Egypt for another 1,000 years. The hardest tool a worker holds is a copper blade, and copper is soft. It bends. It blunts against stone within minutes. There is no pulley to lift a weight straight up. There is no block and tackle, no winch, no crane. The wheel exists somewhere in the ancient world, but on soft desert sand, a wheeled cart under a 40-ton load simply digs itself into a grave. So picture the task. You must cut 2.5 million blocks. You must move them, some of them from a quarry 500 miles up the river. You must raise them as high as a 40-story building. And you must place each one so precisely that 4,500 years later, a laser survey will struggle to find the error. Every part of that sentence sounds impossible. None of it was magic. All of it came from one decision, made by one man, who wanted to be remembered forever. His name was Khufu. The Greeks would later call him Cheops. He was the second pharaoh of Egypt's 4th dynasty, and he ruled a kingdom that had only recently learned to build and cut stone at all. His father, Pharaoh, had been the great experimenter. He built 3 pyramids, and at least one of them buckled mid-construction, its angle collapsing into the shape we now call the bent pyramid. That failure mattered. Khufu's engineers inherited it. They knew what too steep an angle would do, and they had watched a generation learn to quarry, to haul, and to stack on a scale no one had attempted before. So when Khufu gave the order, he was not starting from nothing in knowledge, but in ambition he was leaping into the dark. He wanted the largest stone structure any human had ever built. Not a tomb, a statement in limestone that he had existed. If you find that kind of story worth your time, subscribe. This channel is built on how impossible things actually got made. Because the moment Khufu gave the order, his architects faced the first real question. Who exactly was going to move all that stone? For 2,000 years, the answer everyone gave was simple. Slaves. Whips, chains. 100,000 wretched captives dying under the lash to satisfy a god-king's vanity. It is a powerful image. It is also wrong. In the 1990s, archaeologists digging just south of the pyramids found the people who actually did the work. Not a slave pit, a town. Bakeries that could turn out thousands of loaves a day. Breweries. Storerooms stacked with the bones of cattle and sheep. Prime cuts, the kind of meat a captive would never see. They found barracks, workshops, and a cemetery. And in that cemetery were the workers themselves, buried with care, their graves marked, some with the honorific titles of their crews. Their skeletons tell the story plainly. Many had healed fractures, bones that had been set by a doctor and allowed to mend. Slaves are not given surgeons. These were paid laborers, organized into rotating crews, fed better than most Egyptians ate at home, and proud enough of the work to want their part in it carved above their tombs. They were not the broken. They were the workforce of a state that knew exactly what it was doing. The real question was never who, it was where they got the stone. Most of the pyramid is local. The yellowish core blocks were quarried right there on the Giza plateau, often just a few hundred yards from where they were laid. That was the easy stone. To cut it, workers traced the outline of a block with copper chisels, then drove wooden wedges into the seams. Some believe they soaked those wedges with water so the wood swelled and split the rock along the line. Block by block, the quarry became the building, but the fine white limestone for the outer casing came from Tura, across the river, a denser, brighter stone that could be polished smooth. And the hardest material of all, the granite that lines the burial chamber, came from Aswan, more than 500 miles to the south. Granite laughs at copper. To shape it, workers pounded it with balls of dolerite, a stone harder than the granite itself, hammering for weeks to dress a single beam. Some of those beams weigh as much as 80 tons. They were not carried. They could not be carried. Which leaves the question that has nagged every engineer who ever stood at the base and looked up. How do you move a stone heavier than a house across 500 miles of desert and river with rope and muscle alone? The answer turns out to be almost embarrassingly elegant. You put the stone on a wooden sledge and you drag it. But dry sand piles up in front of the runners and fights you the whole way. So the Egyptians wet the sand. A tomb painting from a few centuries later shows exactly this. A colossal statue on a sledge, dozens of men hauling on ropes, and one figure standing at the front, pouring water onto the sand in their path. For a long time, scholars thought he was performing a ritual. He was not. He was doing physics. Damp sand binds together and stiffens. Tests have shown that wetting the sand to just the right point can cut the pulling force roughly in half. Suddenly, a job that needs 1,000 men needs 500. For the long distances, they let the river do the work. Each summer the Nile flooded, and Egyptian engineers cut canals to channel that water almost to the foot of the plateau. Heavy stone traveled by barge, floating most of the way, dragged only at the end. It is a clean, clever, completely human solution. And remarkably, we are not guessing. One man wrote part of it down. In 2013, on a windswept stretch of the Red Sea coast called Wadi el-Jarf, a French team unearthed something no one expected to survive. Rolls of papyrus. The oldest inscribed papyrus ever found. Written more than 4,500 years ago, during the reign of Khufu himself. And these were not prayers or poetry. They were a logbook, a working diary, kept by a middle official named Merer, who supervised a crew of about 40 men. Merer recorded their days the way a foreman might fill a timesheet, where they went, what they carried. And there, in faded ink older than the alphabet, Merer describes loading white limestone at the Tura Quarries and sailing it down the river to a place he calls Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu. The Great Pyramid. This is the moment the myth dissolves and the history becomes real. We are no longer reconstructing how it might have been done. We are reading the words of a man who helped do it, who watched the casing stones float toward Giza, and who logged it before he went home. The diary tells us how the stones arrived. It does not tell us how they went up. For that, we have to argue. Here is the question no logbook answers. Once the stone reaches the plateau, how do you lift it 480 feet into the air? Almost everyone agrees the basic tool was a ramp. Drag the block up a slope instead of hoisting it. But the details are where the trouble starts. A single straight ramp gentle enough to haul stone up would have to be nearly a mile long and contain more material than the pyramid itself. That seems absurd. So others propose a ramp that spirals up around the outside, hugging the four faces as it climbs. But a spiral ramp buries the very corners the builders needed to keep checking for alignment, and it leaves no room to read the angles. A French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin went further and argued for a ramp built inside the pyramid, a corkscrew tunnel, hidden within the walls, still partly there to be found. And in 2018, in an ancient alabaster quarry at Hatnub, archaeologists found a real ramp, steep, flanked by staircases and rows of post holes, a system that may have let crews drag blocks up far sharper slopes than anyone thought possible. The honest answer is that we still don't know which method raised the Great Pyramid. We only know it was some clever combination of these, and that whoever designed it could do something even harder than lifting stone. They could aim it. Lifting stone is brute force. Aiming it is genius. Before a single block went down, the builders had to flatten the bedrock. The base of the Great Pyramid is level across 13 acres to within just over half an inch. To do that without a laser, they likely cut shallow channels into the rock, flooded them with water, and used the perfectly flat water surface as their reference, chipping the stone down to that line everywhere the water touched. Then came the alignment. The four sides point to true north, south, east, and west, off by only about 1/15 of a degree. That is more accurate than many buildings put up today. They had no compass, and true north isn't even where a compass points, so they almost certainly read the sky, watching a star rise and set on the flat horizon and bisecting the angle between, or tracking the slow circle of the stars around the unmoving northern point of the heavens. Think about what that means. To square a building to the planet, they used the planet's own rotation, written in starlight. This was not luck. This was a civilization that had turned observation into instruction, and instruction into stone. And the same precision they aimed at the sky, they buried deep inside the mountain. Most pyramids are nearly solid stone. The Great Pyramid is not. Climb inside and the engineering gets bolder. A narrow passage opens into the Grand Gallery, a soaring corbelled hall 28 feet high, its walls stepping inward, course by course, until they almost meet at the top. It is a vault built without a true arch, holding back the weight of the mountain by sheer geometry. At its heart sits the king's chamber, lined entirely in red Aswan granite. The ceiling is made of 9 granite beams, each weighing as much as 50 to 80 tons, hauled up and set in place roughly 70 meters above the ground. And here the builders did something that reveals how well they understood their materials. Above that ceiling, they left 5 hollow spaces stacked one atop another, the relieving chambers, with massive granite slabs between them. Their job is to catch the crushing weight of the stone above and shunt it out to the sides, away from the chamber, so the roof would never collapse. It worked. 4,500 years, and the ceiling has not failed. This is not a pile of rocks. It is structural engineering, reasoned out in an age before the word existed, and every ounce of it was placed by hand, by a workforce organized like a machine. Forget the 100,000 slaves. The real number was probably closer to 20,000 people at the peak, and most of them were not lifting stone. They were feeding it, cooking, brewing, hauling water, making rope, repairing copper tools, doctoring the injured, keeping the records. The ones who did move the blocks were sorted into crews with names painted right onto the stones. Names we can still read, gangs that called themselves things like the Friends of Khufu and the Drunkards of Menkaure. There was pride and there was competition built into the system. Above them sat a chain of overseers, scribes, and architects coordinating thousands of moving parts across roughly 20 years. Think about what that requires. Quarries running on schedule 500 miles apart, barges timed to the flood, enough grain stored to feed a small city that produces nothing but a tomb. The Great Pyramid is often called a miracle of engineering, and it is. But the deeper miracle is administrative. To build it, Egypt had to invent the management of large numbers of human beings toward a single distant goal, a skill we still struggle with today. The stone is what survived. The organization is what made the stone possible, and once, that stone did not look the way it looks now. The pyramid you picture in your mind, that steep stack of rough brown blocks, like a giant staircase, is not what Khufu built. What he built was smooth. The entire structure was sheathed in that fine white Tura limestone, dressed and polished until the 4 faces were almost mirror flat. In the sun, it would have blazed. A pure white mountain catching the desert light, visible for miles in every direction, so bright the Egyptians called it the Gleaming One. At the very top may have sat a capstone sheathed in electrum, a gold and silver alloy, throwing back the dawn like a spark of fire above the plateau. Imagine standing at its base 4,500 years ago. Not a ruin, not an ancient curiosity, a brand new blinding perfectly geometric object, the largest and most precise thing in the human world, rising out of the sand as if the sky itself had set it down. That is what the casing stones gave it. Nearly all of them are gone now, and the story of how they vanished is, in its own way, just as human as the story of how they were laid. For thousands of years, the casing held. Then, in 1303, a massive earthquake rolled through the region and shook the smooth stones loose. And there, suddenly, was a mountain of perfectly cut, perfectly portable building material, sitting on the doorstep of a growing medieval city. Cairo could not resist. Over the following centuries, builders carted the fallen casing away and used it. The gleaming white skin of Khufu's pyramid was broken up and worked into the mosques, the walls, and the fine houses of a new capital. Pieces of the Great Pyramid are scattered across Old Cairo to this day, hidden in plain sight in the fabric of the medieval city. There is a strange humility in that. The most ambitious structure of the ancient world spent part of its later life as a quarry, its monument to one king quietly recycled into 1,000 ordinary buildings for everyone else. What we climb and photograph today is the rough inner core, the skeleton. The blazing white mountain Khufu raised is mostly gone. But strip away the myths, the missing stone, even the gold, and you are left with the thing that actually matters. Every few years, someone insists it could not have been people. It had to be aliens, or a lost super civilization, or some forgotten technology. And you can see why the idea is tempting. The scale is so far beyond a single human life that it feels like it must come from somewhere else. But look at what we actually have. A worker's town with its bakeries and its cemeteries. A foreman's diary describing the boats and the stone. Crew names painted on the blocks. A quarry ramp with its post holes still in the rock. Every link in the chain is human, and every one of them is ordinary. The truth is harder to accept than aliens because it asks more of us. The Great Pyramid was built by people no smarter and no stronger than you, using water, rope, copper, levers, and arithmetic, and one thing more. They had a society that could hold a single purpose steady for 20 years and bend tens of thousands of lives toward it. That is the real technology on display at Giza. Not anti-gravity. Organization, patience, and will, executed at a scale that still humbles us. The pyramid is not proof that someone helped us. It is proof of what we are capable of, alone. Stand at Giza today and run the inventory of what they had. Copper that bent, rope that frayed, wooden sledges, water poured on sand, the stars overhead, and a few thousand people who showed up to work. From almost nothing, they raised a mountain so true to the planet and so well made that it outlasted every empire that came after it, including the one that built it. The pharaohs are gone, the white casing is gone, the gold is gone. The pyramid is still here, still pointing at true north, still standing 480 feet over the sand, after 45 centuries that erased nearly everything else humans have ever made. It was never magic, and it was never aliens. It was a copper chisel, a wet patch of sand, and the stubborn collective will to finish something no one would live to see completed. The oldest of the 7 wonders of the world is the only one still standing, built against every limitation of its age, from nothing. If you want to see how more impossible things were actually made, subscribe.